To order for Tuesday, December 8th, 2015. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Shaw?
Here.
Commissioner Pauly?
Here.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Mangelberg?
Here.
And Mayor Holliday.
Here. So, discussion items starting with 15495 Tourism Grant Process Proposal, OCCIT process. Mr. Underwood.
Mayor, back in, a few meetings ago, the staff was directed to go back and look at the OCCIT process, kind of refine that and clean that up a little bit. And so I've been working on that, and tonight I'm submitting to you a proposal for a couple of options on how to approach that. You'll see in your staff report, I have two options. Option one being a kind of creation of a tourism committee that would establish goals at the beginning of the year toward tourism. The staff would bring those goals back to the City Commission for approval, and then staff would review applications as they came in based on those goals. Staff would give their opinion of approval or disapproval on those applications, send them back to the committee for some feedback, and then bring them back to the commission for final approval. Option two for the tourism. This is the. I'm sorry. Let me step back. This is for the transient room tax funds that we would have. The trust fund, we've separated that in the code. So the trust fund would be utilized when the funds were available. So they're not always there. But when they are available, then we would initiate a committee for review of those applications. But what I'm referring to now is just for the transient room taxes. Option two, instead of a standing commission or a standing committee, we would form an ad hoc committee at the beginning of the year to review the applications with staff. Staff and the committee then would bring that feedback and their recommendations to the City Commission for final approval. And I was, as we were working on this, the tourism grant or planning, tourism strategic plan came about that the Tourism Council was working on. And in light of that, we have a few options. This is just a proposal to start the discussion on these options. We do have a few options now that I would propose that since this tourism grant this tourism plan is proposed, that we look at different ways of approaching this next cycle of transient room tax dollars. One is to totally suspend the award of any grants for this coming year. Or we could award grants as usual. Here. We could award grants as usual for this coming year, not recognizing the development of the strategic plan. We could suspend grants totally and put all our efforts toward implementing the new plan that's been proposed, and refine. We could refine the plan, and then we could also hold a percentage of the transient room tax back to fund the essential folks that rely on the grants, and use the remaining dollars to help implement the strategic plan. I think I covered all of those. So that's it in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer any questions or provide any other information.
I have a question. What are the anticipated revenues that could potentially be granted this year? And with the new, the changed transit room tax, what are the projected revenues for next year?
Well, let me step back and say I would recommend that we do the hybrid approach, which is reserve some for the grant cycle for this year. And we looked at the groups that usually rely on the grants. And based upon that, I would hold about $30,000 for this round and keep the remainder for implementation of the strategy. As far as the actual revenue for the 6%, I'm not exactly sure, but it's a little over 100,000, I believe, is our projections.
Mr. Parnell?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Commissioner Mangleberg. So, in the years past, we had about $60,000 allocated to grants. You recall that in July 1, we started charging intermediaries, online companies, for the service there. That's resulted in about $3,000 a month. So we've added another $30,000, and then the hotels increased the rate. So we're looking at probably $100,000 or more this year before implementing the additional 2%. So probably about $130,000, $140,000. So we have seen a pretty big, well, a doubling of the revenue that's coming in from years past. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Well, this all kind of started that, I'm not sure when the whole grant process started, but a lot of the nonprofits were looking forward to this revenue stream a little bit. And then, of course, this last round, we did suggest that some of these folks would not be, it's kind of seed money, and it's not going to be given to people that have been using it every year. It's kind of seed money for projects and stuff. So I think we were kind of getting used to that, and now if we do this and basically drop it all of a sudden, that kind of concerns me a little bit. So just my input.
Carol?
So from before the last grant cycle, it was mentioned that we step back and look at how we're spending our tourism dollars. And so we decided, since it had already been out there, the grants, and people had already written some of their grants, that we would continue and award the last cycle. And so we did. But then we let everybody know we are stepping back and we are looking at how we're spending our tourism dollars. I think it's really worth looking at having a concentrated effort, an effort with the overall plan instead of kind of the haphazard grants and having people dependent on those grants, but yet have something that, works together to really build tourism in Oregon City and build that framework and structure that will last. And that's what I like about the action plan. I do agree we need to make sure that everybody has input in that plan. That's extremely important because you want something with a good framework that will stand up over time and be solid going forward. You don't want anything that's not, going to do that. So I like the one where we look for that plan for 2017. And are you thinking that it should be from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, or can we start the process midway through the year?
Well, that's the typical cycle, is starting at the beginning of the year.
For the grant cycle.
Yes.
But if it's not a grant program, then it wouldn't necessarily have to be that cycle. Okay.
Okay, so the reason I pulled this off of, or at least the presentation off of the work session, was because this work session was pretty full already, and I knew that was going to take, a lot of time to have it done right for us. And I got some communications from various sources saying that they thought this was going a little fast, and they felt like some people had not been involved in the process yet. So we're going to see the presentation in the work session in February. That gives the folks a chance to have another meeting in January and see if they can bring everybody else together. My concern is that if we're going to be turning $120,000 or more over to someone, that's going to have to be a constituted city advisory committee. It can't be a group of a bunch of people. So no matter, and I would look for a recommendation from you guys coming out of your next meeting, how those folks might be selected, but it's going to have to be enacted by ordinance, and they're going to have to be appointed by the mayor, just like any other of our boards or commissions, so that everything is the same across the board, and the city has some oversight over how that money is spent, and making sure that there is oversight, I guess, is the biggest thing. So that gives everybody some time to look at that, and we can have the presentation in February, and then we'll have time to talk about it among ourselves and let staff come up with some kind of a framework for that.
You're specifically addressing the action plan, is that correct?
I'm specifically addressing having the guy from Bend come and give
Okay.
us that
Right.
presentation
Right.
at the February work session when he can have as much time as he needs to do that. I didn't want to cut him down to 15 minutes or whatever. I don't want the Reader's Digest condensed version of this. I want the whole thing.
Well, there's still the question of the approach for next grant cycle for the transient room tax. Do we want to suspend that altogether and not award any of the grants? Because we're coming up on that cycle. Or we could choose one of the options that I presented here, whether it be the committee, the structured committee, or the ad hoc committee, or we could do the hybrid model. And let me add one caveat to that, is that if we do one of the committees, if we fund it with one of these committees, then we've put the criteria in a format where it totally focuses on tourism projects, whereas before it was kind of meshed together community enhancement projects and tourism projects. Some projects didn't really have much to do with tourism per se, so we've kind of created that dividing line, and so that's what the trust is for. Is more of the community enhancement projects, whereas if these committees were formed, they'd focus on solely tourism type projects, related projects.
So you recommended setting aside $30,000 for this cycle.
Yes.
And what groups did you anticipate that would take care of?
Well, the ones that typically rely on the funding are the Chamber. Main Street has relied on it in the past. The McLaughlin Memorial Association, the Car Club, the Trick and Racy Car Club, and the Clackamas County Historical Society.
How long has the car show been going on, Commissioner Smith? 6 years?
That's fine. This-
So not to get into individuals, but as I said when I came on as mayor, I think all of these grant programs should be about letting somebody get started, not a continued year after year after year after year funding. So I think 5 years is plenty of time to get yourself established and find a way to make it pay for itself. If you can't do that, then maybe it's an event that shouldn't be continuing on. The citizens of Oregon City, no matter where that money, what pot of money that's coming from, shouldn't be paying, year after year for an event that isn't, if A isn't paying for itself or E isn't generating enough revenue to maybe bring something back to the city. I mean, if you talk about, say, St. Paul and the rodeo, or Mount Angel and the thing down there, those things produce money for the city. They don't take money from the city. So that's kind of where I'm at on that.
We realized that, and we took that into account when we were developing the new criteria. However, it is kind of late in the grant season where some of these folks are already planning their events.
Well, I thought we warned them earlier this
we
year.
did. So, I mean, we're just offering some consideration in there.
Yep.
The next
Commissioner
year.
Smith?
It's going to be a long one.
Do I need a duck?
No, it's good.
Okay. Just
Okay,
checking.
so I want to go back over. There is so many pieces intertwined in this, and I don't feel confident that maybe everyone up here knows all those things. I'll try to do it as very quickly as possible, but I have a couple questions. First of all,
I'm going to take notes.
we need to understand that Oregon City Civic Improvement, well, there's 3 grants in Oregon City. Okay? Oregon City Civic Improvement Trust, which the name really confuses it because really the trust is part of donations that come in for parks, etc. That fund is being split aside. What the tourism transient room tax for Oregon City has always gone in there and then been dispersed by the commission. So that's one grant. Those are going to be split so that we have a Oregon City Civic Improvement Trust fund that will still be there for donations, things like that. The transit room tax fees will go into a different fund, which is proposed for this new tourism body to look over. Separate from that, we have Metro Enhancement. Metro Enhancement, which comes from the dumping fees at the Metro transfer station. The body that oversees that, as we know, is Metro Enhancement Board or Commission. What do we call it? Metro Enhancement
Enhancement Committee.
Committee. Then, in addition to that, we have the community partnership grants through the county, which is, in the past, been administered by the Oregon City Tourism Council. The Oregon City Tourism Council, that is an open group of heritage sites and vested interest people in Oregon City, Chamber, Main Street, etc., that make a proposal to the county for the $20,000 that the county gives various communities, including Oregon City, for their transient room tax. So the topic tonight is creating another committee that will deal with the OCCIT grants. My question then is, I assume that that same committee would be the one that would deal with the CCP grants, and that's the community partnership grants from the counties, the county's transient room tax.
Okay.
I would assume we're going to create a new body, that body replaces the Oregon City Tourism Council, and that body reviews the OCCIT grants and the community partnership grants, or creates the plan. So they would create the tourism action plan that would go to the county. Now, to me, that makes sense, but I think after this meeting, most of us are going to, I'm going to recommend that the OCCIT grants, which are really the Oregon City Transient Room tax, is suspended, and that the new tourism group that may or may not be formed wouldn't really deal with those because it wouldn't exist. That group would probably in the future have to deal with things like the CCP grants, and in the interim that some other plan takes over. I think these are all intertwined, which is why I think it was kind of unfortunate that we kind of waited to have the other discussion. I think that if we feel, well, first of all, a lot of the groups that we have mentioned that we are worrying about not getting grants this year, most of them have written letters supporting the fact that they don't want to stop the grants and they want to support this plan, tourism plan. Now, with the exception of a few people that probably haven't had input yet, I think it's very important to get those people's input, other groups that have gotten grants in the past, to do that. Is the tourism money the most appropriate way to deal with those grants? Absolutely not. That money is not supposed to be used for 1-2 day events. If we as a city think that we need a grant program to deal with events, then maybe we create one. Maybe we put that in the budget, but it shouldn't be tourism room taxes unless it's an event that's bringing people in from outside of the region. So I think we have, a lot of people saying that they support this idea of rethinking how we use our transient room tax in Oregon City. And I think what we really need to, the first step in that is really deciding, do we think the tourism tax is the best way to do that? The Oregon City transient room tax. I don't think it is. So I think that would be a question to ask first, because after we decide that, we can then decide if there's a better way that that money is used. I think a lot of people in this community are urging us to think about moving forward with some sort of plan. Whether or not Doug's plan is the exact plan or whether it's tweaked or what, I don't know. But I think that still then leaves the question about how we deal with the community partnership grants and even Metro Enhancement. Because remember, the whole reason we brought this topic up was to formalize all our other grant processes with committees that are appointed by the mayor and then brought to the commission. So far, we don't have an answer on how to address that with the community partnership grants unless this new tourism body does that. But if we create a new tourism body to do that, then how does that play a part in this new tourism plan that we may or may not be going forward with? So there's a lot of questions, and I think, that's part of why we had these work sessions scheduled, these two topics scheduled together. It is something that I don't think any of us anticipate having a full plan and ready to go forward in the next month or two. That's why we have work sessions. We have work sessions, and we have more work sessions, and then we have meetings until we get to a point where we know where we're going. But I think even already tonight, you look on your dais, most of the groups you mentioned that were worried about not giving grants to said, don't give us grants. So,
To be honest, I wasn't worried about because I'm with you. I could see suspending, the entire grant process this cycle. I was more concerned with the information I got from the public that several people hadn't been talked to concerning Mr. LaPlata's plan, and that it was based mostly on historic tourism and didn't have some of the outdoor components that they thought should be in there. And so I wanted to slow the process down and give them a little, a month to have another meeting and talk about those things.
I think it's a little naive for people to expect this group to go out and talk to them individually when there was an open house and there has been many different tourism meetings that are open to all those groups and they knew about it.
I agree.
They just didn't come to the meetings.
But I also agree with you the fact that this is not something that is going to happen, in a month or two. So I didn't feel like there was the kind of time pressure to have that presentation tonight. A couple weeks before Christmas and all those other things that are going on.
Right.
We have a serious discussion about having a city manager coming up and a few other things. So I kind of wanted to push that back 6 or 8 weeks till we had to get some other things in place, and then we can start having that discussion again. But no matter who it is, I would hear, do we want to just give some general direction that we're going to suspend the grants this cycle, or do we think that it should put aside some money for say the $30,000 that Mr. Underwood suggests? Commissioner Mengelberg.
I have a comment. One, I would support setting aside the money to have a larger pool to implement the plan that's agreed to and is going to take us forward. Because in looking at the original plan, it looks like some pretty big money involved. Yes, we can get there, but if we launch it right, I think it'll be more successful. So I would say suspend grants this year. But in regard to the active tourism, I think that it's worth considering as a component for several reasons. One is Newell Creek Canyon is going to open up here pretty quick. Within the year, right? That's a major active tourism asset that the community is going to be having, that's going to be needing promotion probably. And then with the bistro at the rail station, that's another opportunity for active recreation that can be tied to heritage and all that stuff. But to just ignore it and not include it in the plan, I think is an oversight that needs to be worked through. So that's my 2 cents.
Mr. Shaw?
Well, yeah, I think we need to award the grants as usual for 2016, just to prepare these organizations that this could be the end of that part, but they also have to recognize that this tourism program could be to their benefit too. So we just need to do some education here, so we're just not kind of hitting these folks head on with this and we're done. So,
Commission President Pauly?
We and I agree with that they shouldn't be hit head on, but we did tell them last year that, and there was talks of suspending the grant cycle last year, and I was a big advocate for, no, they've already put their grant applications in, let's go ahead and go through with this. And I think it was clearly communicated that we were taking this to the drawing board. So I'm not worried about that, especially with letters of support from most people that do receive the grants wanting us to step back and look at this. I think I want to circle back around to what Rocky was saying. I think what it really comes down to is what is the best use of this transient lodging tax? What is the best use? Is it a grant program? I think we've all decided no. And we have the different heritage groups that have decided no too. Is it a comprehensive plan to create a framework to go forward? I think we've all decided yes. So we just have to decide how we're going to do that. And we do have a template in front of us. So it's about refining that and working together.
Anything else?
So, I mean, I agree with that. I think that I don't think that we need to hold money over for this cycle. I think, if we do, it could be a small amount, but we still then have to figure out how we decide who gets that money.
Can I make a... Go ahead.
So that's the one piece of it. The other piece of it, not to be confused with this, is that suspending the grants don't mean we want to suspend the process with the county in asking for community partnership grants. So those monies are also available for some of the projects that we're talking about. But it depends on what form comes to disperse that. So that money comes into the city. The staff person is Michelle Benville, and then she works with whatever board or body, which at this point is the Oregon City Tourism Council, which really needs to be thought about and how that goes forward too.
So, you finished?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to ask a couple questions. So, Rocky, you may have answered this already, but so the community partnership grant funding is the portion of the county's room tax
Right.
that they apportion to the city based
Varies.
on some methodology.
Right.
And so that comes into the city,
Right.
and then we disperse it how?
Through the Oregon City Tourism Council.
And who is the
Based
Oregon City
on-
Tourism Council?
Well, it's an open group
It's an
of
open group,
chamber, downtown, heritage sites. Anyone can come to the meetings. They create a plan at the beginning of each year, the Tourism Action Plan, which is similar to what Eric's kind of referring to, having a plan.
Okay.
That plan is updated every year based on what that group thinks the tourism needs are, and then decides how to disperse that money. In some years, it's been individual grants for different groups. In some years, it's been spent on larger tourism visions for the whole city.
So let me offer a compromise here. So we have this Oregon City Tourism Council, which I think is probably going to end up being the city-sanctioned body that's going to oversee where this big $140,000 goes to the plan. Okay, so we'll have to figure out what the size of that body is and how it's how it's constituted, but it will have to be appointed by the mayor, and it'll be, run through a resolution and all that. But for this cycle, I would suggest that if there are organizations out there who feel like they can't possibly get by without a grant, that they send those to Mr. Underwood. He brings them to the city commission, and then we vet those by our own standards and make a decision, yes or no, based on whether we think those are important or not. but in no case are we going to grant more than $30,000 this cycle, and we may not grant any of it. Is that a reasonable compromise?
Well, I just wonder if that kind of opens a Pandora's box. So,
Well, theoretically, a
Yeah,
lot of these
'cause all of
people have
these-
said they're willing to give up those grants. So, I mean, maybe there's a group or two out there that hasn't said that isn't supportive of this. And there are a lot of cats to herd into this box.
I know there.
So-
Exactly.
There are, and I want to say too that the organizations, even though they're not, if the grants are suspended, even though they're not getting the support from the grants, they are getting support. They're getting tourism support with that framework.
Right.
They're going to get support. That's the whole point, is to have a comprehensive plan and effort to try to coordinate things. And I think that the groups have really come together and say, let's work together. Let's all work together to make tourism a real sustainable thing in Oregon City. And I think that this is probably, Rocky, isn't this the first time that we've really been at this place where all the groups
I've never seen it.
So
Yeah, I've
this
never
is
seen
our
this.
opportunity, and I think that we need to, really take their lead and do our job and make sure that we help in that moving forward, and really get our act together as a city and get a tourism and get some marketing going and get packages that we can market and get people to the city and be ready for the Willamette Falls Legacy Project and Newell Creek Canyon and everything else.
Mr. Parno.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. First of all, I want to commend the Commission for a couple of things. One is recognizing the need for unified effort in relation to the tourism program in the city. I think that's fantastic, and I know you're all really behind that, and so that's fantastic. Secondly, being aware that we want to establish this program right. I know a couple of you have said that, and the recommendation that I would make is very similar to what you're saying, which is, and backing up a quick step, I appreciate that Jonathan came and met with Tony and I this week or last week, and kind of walked us through the program, and it looked pretty good to me. If I may, my own personal opinion is, if you're going to take a shot, go for it, see if it works. We've never tried this approach, so at some point, let's do it. Tony and I were talking about the budget in general and the concepts there, and Jonathan was sharing some information with us. And what I felt was important was, if the Commission instructs us to move forward and we recommend this plan, and we want to be successful in it, let's build up a little reserve working capital money, which is what you're talking about here. And so, since we know that the grant dollars have been coming in a little bit more, the transient room tax dollars have been coming a little more, we're, even with the $30,000 ask, which I don't have an opinion on that's strong, we're probably going to have about $120,000 set aside. It fits along a pretty good timeline. So I think I'd heard that Commissioner Smith recommended that we talk about during Commission goal setting, for 2017, 2019, let's go for this thing. In that time, and in the meantime, we can do some other things, getting ready and spend some funds. But in that time, if we save money for a couple cycles, that gives us working capital. Should we not have another hotel pop up right away, or should revenues not come in as projected, then we have a couple years of build-up funds to sustain the program. So, envisioning how this would work, if it's a 4-year ramp-up, you wait for 2 years and then do the 4-year ramp-up, you've got 2 years of cash sitting in the bank, so your 4-year ramp-up can be more successful. So for that reason, I commend you in wanting to set aside some reserves. Also, it gives us time to look at, the Willamette Falls Legacy Riverwalk project. Where are we at with that? Some of these other things that you mentioned that are coming on board. And finally, to look at the proposal that's on the table a little bit closer. It mentioned grants, but didn't say where they'd be coming from. We'd like to know more about that. We could do some cash flow projections. When's the money coming in? How's it going out? So we can be a little bit more firm on the plan. So for those reasons, I really appreciate that. That we should take a shot at it, because you only know if you try. And then B, that we do it kind of in a conservative way, that we have the highest percentage chance of being successful. So that's that, and thank you, Commission, for that. In regards to what Eric had proposed, I think you're in a pretty safe position to make the determination how you want, and I guess I would recommend either saying, A, we want to take these monies, put them into reserves, and we've talked with the granting committees. We can just do the whole ball of wax. I think another alternative would just be say, that is our intention as a commission. Eric, why don't you make some phone calls over the next couple of weeks? make sure we're not missing anything, and if we are, we might revisit this idea of coming back and doing some, smaller portions of grants, not to exceed 30,000 or something like you said. I think Eric or Jonathan would have a good sense of, and you all would have a good sense of what might be out there. I don't think there's a lot. Correct me if I'm wrong.
There's a lot of one-time applicants.
You think we might be missing anything?
We have pretty comprehensive records of the applicants, and
Okay.
I mean, it's some of these are steady, and the ones that I've listed are the ones that have applied every year. Those are the only ones.
Do you feel like you would want to make some calls, or do you feel like the commission?
I do feel like that, yes. I
Okay.
could certainly do that, yes.
So that's a viable alternative where the commission could say, our intention is to set aside the reserves, make one more set of calls, let us know if there's anything that might be outstanding.
Have there already been people that submitted applications? Okay.
No.
We haven't opened it up yet.
Commissioner
I
Smith?
think so. Okay.
I guess the one thing I would say is that I understand having the reserve there just for the possibility that there's groups that somehow need that money to go through this next season. But I guess that bothers me to some degree because we have the largest majority of these grants, these grant groups, that people that have been recipients in the past who said, we're waiving our right to get that money. And so, they're doing that with the faith that we're going to do the right thing with tourism with that money. And to then just hand out some money to other groups that haven't taken that leap, I think, sends an interesting message. So we need to be careful about how that goes. I think if this city thinks that there are events in this town that are important to give grant money to, then put it in the budget. And if not, don't.
Just wondering what the folks who submitted the letter of support, what their timing expectations are. For the grant
Well, I think that's a reasonable question to ask. When we talked about, allowing the grant cycle last year, that we probably weren't going to do it this coming year, that we were going to, I was anticipating that part of that conversation would be at this level, that all of a sudden, literally out of the blue, as far as at least I'm concerned, this whole thing kind of showed up. And so I haven't really had a chance to fully digest it. I haven't seen a full presentation on it. And to be honest, people have been talking about tourism and historic tourism in Oregon City since I was, in high school.
And those people know what we're talking about tonight.
I get it. But us taking the time to do it right is not a bad thing. And, to spend the next few months talking about how we're going to structure this, I don't think is a bad idea. I don't disagree with any of you about, I can see Commissioner Shaw's point. I can see your point. I'm saying let's let Mr. Underwood make some phone calls, talk to some folks. If there are a couple of groups out there that are absolutely got to have the money for whatever reason, then they can come make their case to the City Commission.
You know what? We also have the Metro Enhancement Fund, which is double what it was last year, which is another source of revenue for other efforts like that.
But there is a specific set of guidelines for Metro Enhancement
Yeah,
that
not tourism.
don't fit this. Theoretically, the two groups, one group should not be able to apply for the same grant from both bodies, right?
They
tourism
could,
I'm sure there's something that could work for both grants, but it's rare.
and they could also apply to the Clackamas County City Fund as well. So there's other pots of money.
Yeah, I just
that-
think there's Commissioner Smith brought up a ton of great points, and that is that this is still really not even a skeleton yet.
Right.
And there's got to be a lot of more meat put on the bone before we can, make decisions about funding a lot of money to one organization or even one, And I fully expect that this group is going to end up being an advisory committee to the City Commission, because I can't see us funneling money that comes through the city and not having the City Commission's oversight. So Do you think you have completely
Yeah,
muddy direction?
I think I have enough, yes. Go ahead.
I don't know.
Wyatt?
Yeah, just a quick add, just for some perspective. So if we, over a 2-year cycle, hold the funds over is $300,000 or something like that. So, $20,000-$30,000 out of that bucket probably wouldn't make a substantial difference. I think that staff would appreciate some consensus from the commission to either kind of cut the cord, if you will, let the grantees of the past know, and a lot of which have been represented letters already. We're not going to be doing a grant program this year, but there's going to be a great tourism benefit down the road, which we would communicate that as effectively as we could. Option A. Option B, Mr. Underwood make some phone calls, come back to the commission if there's any major events that we might have missed, and it would be great to have the commission kind of provide some consensus direction on that.
I'm kind of at plan B myself, because I don't want to take the chance that there's something out there that we, missed, forgot about, don't know about. If they come to us with something that, is just ridiculous, then we can just say no. That satisfies Commissioner Shaw's concerns, and then we can move forward in a deliberate manner to look at this program holistically and come up with a solution over the next few months that gets us to where we need to be and be comprehensive about it at the same time.
Okay.
So if I could just try to clarify the process. So I will make the phone calls, and if I see that there's a hardship, I would invite them to apply. And that's how we open up the next round. And then if they apply, then I bring those applications to the city commission.
Right, the Civic
There's
Improvement
no
Trust
internal
no
review.
longer exists
Okay,
for all
right.
intents and purposes.
But there's no internal review or review by the tourism council before it comes to the city commission. They come directly to the city commission. Is that what's being proposed?
Yeah, I think so.
As long as it's in a timely fashion, because
think
these
we'd-
groups that usually get their money at a certain time, that it still can go through the process at that same time.
You say we're
So-
opening the grant cycle on a limited basis for only those groups who feel like their event or program, whatever it is, would be in total jeopardy if that wasn't, if that wasn't available to them. And then we're the ones that decide whether, they sink or swim.
We would put a date certain on when they'll need to be applied, so.
Right. Right.
And
just
that's
hear
not
Marno?
to,
Yeah, I think I would.
yeah.
I would even, to take some of the pressure off the commission about an individual request, have Mr. Underwood make the calls, come back to the commission with here's what we found out. There might be 2 or 3 out there. Are you still wanting to do this? Here's what I found out. That way, we're not doing kind of an advertisement in general. I would say call the regular parties and come back to the commission and say, this is
Right.
what we found out, or
Right.
I agree with that one, because I think if you put it out there that we're accepting grants on a limited basis, we're going to get a whole bunch
That's
of
sort
grant
of say
requests.
there's the Pandora's
And,
box.
and I do feel that we were pretty clear last year that that this grant program was ending. And it hasn't been opened up. There's been nobody that applied. But I do think it's definitely worthwhile reaching out to people to make sure that they understand that. And then if there are any issues, then we should know about it. So that sounds good.
But we also want those groups to realize we're not basically shoving them out, but we're going to be looking for alternatives to help them with their process, their group and stuff, so that that there's still an opportunity there for funding somehow.
Well, exactly. This is we're looking at developing a comprehensive plan to support tourism.
Commissioner
To
Smith?
support it.
And I don't have a problem with that. I think the only other thing I would say that is kind of a question in the air for me is how to deal with the county grant cycle. And so that may need to be on a work session very soon, because that cycle will come fairly quickly, and we'll have to decide how this community applies for that money, whether it's through the existing Oregon City Tourism Council or whether it's the city itself or what. I think that's the next big question we need to deal with.
the so who's the staffer for that, Michelle?
Michelle. Yeah.
And she's not here.
Right.
Okay. So what I would
I don't
like
think we have to talk about it.
No, I know. But what I would like is because to be honest, this is the first time I've heard of the Oregon City Tourism Council, and that they got money and sent it out without, any oversight from the commission. So, and don't be laughing at me. There's so many of you groups. I mean, without.
I've been saying it for years that to have this ad hoc group is just.
Okay. So anyway, if you could get Michelle to give us a list of, say, the last 3 years, what things have been funded through this, then we could have a better idea where that goes. And then Mr. Parno,
Got it.
what was our contingency in our budget for? So we're running on a biennial cycle, right?
Correct.
So total contingency funds.
Ooh.
And don't do the Mr.
Public.
Plead the fifth.
Just pull a number out.
It's a loaded question, Mayor. I know the exact number. Much needed reserves for future other city functions of about $700,000.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to explain why I asked the question. I just wanted to know the number. So, just thinking along the lines of what you were talking about. So, I think you have direction at this point?
Yes, and I have that list you were referring to. I could send that out.
Okay. All right. Does everybody agree this horse is dead? Then we'll move on. 15642 Economic Development Incentive Program. Mr. Underwood, you seem to be hogging the stage tonight.
I'm the star of this evening. So in January 2015, the City Commission established the effort to maintain environments for success in economic development. Part of that is creating a new economic development incentive program. There were some revenues that came in from the right-of-way program, and $150,000 was allocated to economic development to create that program. So what you have before you tonight is a first draft of developing or trying to establish a economic development and city incentive program that's citywide. It's created to focus on a new capital or expanding companies, which we do not have in existence right now. Our grant programs are through urban renewal now, and they focus on existing structures. So this would be focusing on new capital that has a potential for creating additional family wage type jobs. It is in a grant format. Qualifying projects must be commercial, mixed use, or industrial in nature. Like I said before, the construction of new capital or expansion. Up to 2 application review periods per year are based on project demand is what we're proposing. And a maximum grant award of $75,000 per year, or a one-time $150,000 award depending on the level of the project. It would include a 50% or a 1-to-1 match, and the funds would be awarded on a reimbursement basis. And you have the criteria. I've submitted that as an attachment to this report. Hopefully you reviewed that, and so rather than go through the whole thing, I'll just ask if you have any questions about that or any other suggestions for the process or requirements.
I have a question. So it says $75,000 per year, and the maximum grant award is $75,000. So that could be just one grant given per year.
$150,000. It could be
Okay.
just one. Yeah, we're proposing that one project could take it all. When you're looking at larger projects like this, $150,000 really isn't a lot of money sometimes. Or even $75,000, it's really, really minuscule. So that's why we're proposing that.
I think it's great. I think I like the focus on traded sector. I like that it's citywide, because if it were just urban renewal, there wouldn't be very many eligible sites that are zoned industrial. I like that it's tied to capital investment. So it's also important to be able to say you have an incentive, because when you're trying to recruit businesses, that's one of the first questions that gets asked. If the answer is we have nothing, it means that you're not in the game. So even if it's a small amount, the gesture is really important.
Shaw?
So, this can be used on the downtown area in conjunction with urban renewal grant?
Mhm.
So they could get an urban renewal grant and this also?
Right. Well, this is focused on new capital, so they
Yeah.
couldn't get an urban renewal grant if they don't have the structure.
Okay.
So this is, well, if they were expanding on their building, if it was new,
Right.
yes, they could apply.
Because
But-
I know there's projects down there where there's an opportunity to go up.
Yeah.
And so they could be awarded urban renewal and the EDIP grant.
They could, if they wanted to renovate their existing space and then build on top or build in addition to, they could be awarded both.
Okay.
This is a biennium allocation. So
Yeah.
after the biennium, it doesn't go beyond that. It's kind of a one-time thing the way it's been budgeted now.
But I appreciate the fact, like Commissioner Mildenberg was talking about, is that it's a citywide campaign too, so.
Right. This would be, for example, this is, focused more on our infill lots that we have.
Yeah.
So if somebody were to come along, some hardships there in developing that, they could apply for this grant, whereas they couldn't apply for our existing urban renewal grants to get assistance.
So this will be part of the toolkit. Another, yeah.
You say it's only for 2 years. You're saying this is an ongoing program?
We do.
Is this like a test pilot program, or?
Right. Well, the way it was budgeted is that this is a kind of a one-time thing from the revenues for the right-of-way program, and so the department has been allocated this amount of money, and within that 2 years, we would have an incentive program, unless the commission decided they wanted to renew it.
Okay. So I only have one issue with the document, and that is under definitions.
Oh, no.
And so you have definition of a living wage as the minimum income necessary for a worker to meet their needs that are considered to be basic, and that doesn't seem like much of a definition to me. It sounds like more of a generalization,
It's the technical basic definition of living wage.
but it doesn't mean anything. I mean, what worker, what basic needs, what, I don't get it.
So as a comparison, a lot of the cities, including Oregon City now, has the enterprise zone program, and their floor is 150% of the minimum wage. And that's kind of standard for state programs.
Okay.
If
Well,
you
then
want
why
to
do we
have a
say
good-
that rather than this gobbledygook that doesn't really mean anything?
We can certainly change it.
Sorry, I just hate
No.
some of
We
these
don't want
definitions that.
gobbledygook.
Yeah.
Right.
I wanted to say something.
Yes.
No
Be
gobbledygook.
clear. That's good.
Okay.
In my gobbledygook 101 in college didn't.
You're going to use that sometime, weren't you?
There's no question that there is a couple of those terms going on in planning department studies at Portland State. So. What did I do?
Whoa. Portland State, huh?
Hey!
Very nice.
That's
Yeah, me
yeah,
too.
yeah, we graduated from there.
All right.
Be nice.
All right. Anybody else? So, what are you looking for from us?
Just direction to move forward, I guess, since there haven't been any other recommendations or suggestions, just to move, except for the definition, to make that one change and move forward in establishing.
I think I
moving
can
this forward
safely
for
say you
official
have
approval.
consensus to move forward on this.
Yes, it's great.
Okay. So, left we have 15-647, the City Commission meeting calendar. All right.
Yep. So each year at a work session, right before the new year, we bring a calendar of the meeting dates for the next year forward, just to make sure that there aren't any conflicts at this point. We get it out there in the open for the public and for the commissioners to take a look at and make any necessary changes in advance. And then this allows the public the notice necessary on what our upcoming meeting dates will be for 2016. And those can always change, as you know, at your discretion.
Okay, so first up, the January 30th, 2016 retreat is tentative.
Okay.
Okay, depending on the schedule for the city manager's appointment and those kinds of things. Because obviously, if we're gonna get to a city manager appointment, fairly quickly and can reach a consensus, then we want to have that person at that January 30th meeting if we can. If that's not possible, or if it takes longer because of travel or whatever, things that might happen with that, so we're going to leave that tentative, and we'll, maybe move it off to February or March, depending on, obviously we don't want to do that without our new city manager in place, even if he's not here yet, but we could fly him out for that event if we've made the decision. The other thing here, down in June, we have what we just talked about, the Tourism Grant Committee.
Right.
So I think I see it's tentative, so
Tentative.
never mind. That's all I see.
Okay, if there's no changes, we're fine with that.
good.
We'll move forward.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so not on the agenda, but we're going to take a little shot at talking about this. We've all been talking about the Tri-City
my
Service
God.
District. And Oregon City hosted a meeting of the cities and staff a couple months ago where we started a discussion about where this might go. While that wasn't terribly productive, it did begin a more concentrated discussion. Councilor Perry and West Lynn invited several of us to a meeting this last Saturday. So there was an elected representative from Milwaukee, Happy Valley, Oregon City, West Lynn, Gladstone, Damascus. And we had a discussion, and out of that discussion, we came to a consensus that we would like for our group to get together and form an ORS 190 IGA between the 5.5 cities, because nobody really knows if Damascus can exist past, is it March or May?
Probably May.
May. But that we go forward looking at the idea of the 5 cities, let's just say 5 for now, the 5 cities being what is now Tri-Cities, and let the county have CCSD1, which would be the unincorporated part of Clackamas County. And everyone agreed at that table that is something we should look forward to. So we build an IGA based on, we're looking on how to do that financially, operationally, all that stuff, and we spend a year going down that road. With an IGA in place, we can all contribute money to hire a separate attorney that could do that work. Plus, we could have then a centralized place for staff, whether it's finance or operations, public works, to talk about, the equity struggles and who owns what and what is valued at what, so we can get to a place where the 5 cities can work together, and we feel like we're much more powerful working together than we are separately. So I was tasked to coming back to you to see if that sounded like something that was workable. It was not going to be workable for us to try to be just Oregon City and Gladstone and West Lynn. The folks over in West Lynn feel like they want to have a more regional approach, and I understand that. But at the same time, I think cities need to be providing city services, and the county needs to be providing services to unincorporated. And so I think this focus makes more sense. I think we can reach a much more effective consensus and working together with our partner cities who understand what a city is and how a city functions. I think we can come to a place where we can actually make something work. But I'm interested to hear your comments.
So all of the cities that are now being served by the sewage treatment plant would be parties to this IGA. everybody's interested?
Everybody except the county.
Okay.
So we feel like that cities should be providing urban services and the county should be providing whatever services the county provides outside of the urban areas. But that the county shouldn't be in the business of providing urban services. And we feel like the best way to protect the city's interests, all 5 or 6 cities, depending on how you look at it, and going forward and protecting individual rates and understanding that the growth in this particular district, if it were rearranged, is going to happen in the majority in 2 places, here and in Happy Valley. And so we have to understand that, you know, there's going to be differential rate structures or some other way of the folks that don't have a lot of equity as far as equipment or facilities will have to buy in some other way. So, but that's all stuff that's down the road and has to be studied by, you know, guys like Parno who can crunch numbers all day long. And, you know, they got Richard Seal in West Lynn, who's actually doing the finance for Damascus, and, you know, Milwaukee and Happy Valley both have great finance guys. So, you know, we get those 5 people in a room and let them hash out all the numbers and figure out what's going on. At the same time, everybody's got good public works directors and other technical staff. We let them get together. And at some point in time, you know, if we're all reasonable, I think we can find a place where at the end of what we're looking at is governance by the 5 cities of this district, because until we govern our own sewer treatment plant, until we govern our own water, those are the 2 key structures of life for a city. And so you have to have control over those. And we feel like this is something that we can do and we can get done.
So question, this IGA would be primarily around the governance question, but the operations would continue to be with Wes?
The operations would continue to be with Wes, but discussions of operations and other kinds of things going down the road would be part of this year-long discussion that we're talking about having under this IGA, with the ultimate goal being that there would be a governance change and the cities would take this structure back over in some kind of a form like South Fork, where we would have 2 representatives from each of the cities, and no legislative action could take place without at least 1 affirmative vote from each of the member cities. So nobody could gang up on anybody. It couldn't be a 3-2 Happy Valley and Oregon City and Gladstone beating up on West Lynn or Milwaukee. You know, it's while I never recommend an even-numbered board, I have to take into account the 100 years of South Fork working. So, in the case that it's set up correctly, and that again will be part of this year-long discussion. But I need to have at least a general idea tonight, because we're going to kind of drop this bomb at the Regional Wastewater Treatment Capacity Advisory Committee meeting tomorrow or Thursday.
So, Dan, will the county still be using that facility?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's still, you know, there are still IGAs that are in place now. Now, some of those IGAs would probably have to change. But the key idea here is that the folks who have the majority interest in all of the infrastructure, a clear majority of those people live in the 5 cities that we're talking about.
Right.
Probably 80%. Am I? If you took Happy Valley, Milwaukee out of CCSD1, that would be about 80% of the total of the 2 districts, right?
Okay, I wouldn't disagree with you. I don't know the
Okay,
number, but
I'm just taking a wild guess. But the point is that we feel like we would not only be better about looking at technologies and how to best serve everybody in there, but that the brain trust that we have around here in all 5 of the cities would be more likely to come up with innovations than the same old consultants working for the county for the last 30 years.
Yeah. So, the reason I was asking about
Yes.
that, if the county was going to still use the facility, should they be number 6? Just like a city, but they're one of the folks.
Well, here's how we're getting there. Okay, so what I've been tasked to do by this little group of folks that we've gotten together is, one, the county's looking at a work session in January to change the composition of the Tri-Cities Advisory Committee again. They have said for the next advisory committee, they are going back to the letter of the bylaws, meaning that the electeds won't have a seat at the table. They will only listen to the city managers. And then that they were going to move forward to do something else sometime in January. And what I've been tasked to say to them is that if they wish to change the Tri-City bylaws, that the only changes that this entire group of 5 is interested in is replacing the city managers with electeds and not having Greg Geist, the West Director, vote. And that we are also further recommending that that if they wish to have a merged River Health Tri-Cities Advisory Committee, so looking at both the districts having one merged advisory committee, that it consists of the 5 or 6 electeds from each of the cities and 1 county commissioner. And that would be it. No non-electeds, no CPOs, neighborhoods, special districts, none of that. Just the 6 or 7 electeds. And we feel like that, given that we're the 5 cities, that we have a fairly large stick to carry going into that thing.
Yeah, that's fine.
Questions? Consensus?
So about with all due respect to your deep knowledge of this issue, it seems like the public works directors or the city managers might have more of the long-term technical expertise to be kind of dealing with the day-to-day stuff, whereas the mayors would be on the policy side.
The data. So I'm confused.
It makes me nervous to see a bunch of mayors sitting around making very technical, very expensive, very long-term decisions without necessarily the background or expertise to make them. With no offense
make no
intended.
mistake. None of that is happening now.
Okay.
Okay? So we're just trying to get back to the point of having, broad policy decisions be made by elected officials. What's going on now is basically, somebody from West comes up with an idea and they take it up and they say, okay, go ahead. And it may or may not come to the advisory committee, and it may or may not pass the advisory committee, but it still goes on anyway.
Right.
So what we're looking to do is to get back some control. Believe me, I don't want to have broad, intimate knowledge of the wastewater treatment plant. That's what we pay guys like John Lewis to do. I'm a firm believer in depending on the people to do the work that we hire them to do. I rarely work on my own vehicle anymore. While I have some skill in that department, there are a few things I can do, but most of them I can't do on my car anymore. So it's the same with this. I think that we have, in all 5 of the cities, we have great staff that can do those things and that can put their heads together and look at that thing and find ways to make it more efficient and run better. I don't know what the outcome is in the long run of operations, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about getting to a place where we feel like we have a responsive form of government for the ratepayers of all 5 of our cities.
I would support the IGA as you presented it.
I think it'd be great, yeah, because I think when they have those meetings, that the elected person would be there, but I think a staff person to be there with them.
Oh yeah, well, and
because I understand.
Mr. Lewis and Mr. Paulson come to almost every one of those meetings. They go to county meetings that we don't go to. I think one of the key things that you guys need to hear is that, like, at the last Tri-City Advisory Committee meeting, Oregon City and Gladstone were talking about, we want to have a third-party engineering firm look at this whole long-term biosolids plan and hear it from somebody who isn't being paid by the county to do it and all that. And they basically just laughed at us and said, I said, I said, so this is just political theater? And they said, yeah. We have the advisory committees have no authority, and the commission has now shown that they don't listen to what the advisory committees say, even though, Commissioner Savas will still say that the advisory committee's never done anything, or the commission's never done anything either at CCSD or at Tri-Cities that the advisory committees have asked them to do, and it's just not true. There's been several times in the last few months when we've sent specific things up, and here's a specific. We said, you guys just lost the right-of-way appeal, and you got sanctioned by the court for attorney's fees and a prevailing party fee because the judge said virtually you had zero case. And so we're asking you not to proceed forward with appeals. And laughter broke out at the county commission. So that doesn't show much respect for your advisory committee if you can't even keep a straight face while listening to a recommendation.
Well, Mayor Holliday, I think this is a big step, and I think it's a wonderful big step. And the fact that the 5 cities have come together and say, we want to vote, we want a change in governance, we want to make sure that we can be held accountable to our constituents, and we want to know what's going on. Being on an advisory committee, I agree. It was just all the information wasn't being translated. There was no control. There was no oversight. This is a positive step to try to get that oversight, and I think that we should be able to vote things that directly influence our cities, and there's no reason why we shouldn't. So I think it's good to all band together as cities and look out for our citizens.
So the last thing I'll say on this is that so Westland had a work session last night. They came out with a consensus in our direction. We've come to a consensus here tonight. I think that Gladstone has their actual regular meeting / exec session tonight, so I'll hear something about it from Gladstone. Hoping that Happy Valley and Milwaukee can both have some kind of a consensus in either direction. We do have made a decision collectively that we're going to say these things at the Thursday meeting, but everybody else seemed to think that they had a fairly clear consensus. They just needed to double check with their councils.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, good
Wish
job.
I could be at that meeting on Thursday.
What do you got to do?
Got another thing. I think that's the play.
Another thing?
School.
Okay.
Mayor.
But have fun.
Mayor.
Oh, it's always fun at the Regional Wastewater Capacity Treatment Advisory Committee.
Well, there is that 30 minutes of public comment where it might be helpful to have.
Oh, that's true. So, for the first time ever, all of a sudden there's this 30-minute public comment period at the regional committee meeting on Thursday. So if a couple of you guys and maybe, I don't know, maybe the executive director of the chamber and maybe I could get Mr. Fowler or Mr. Where's Father Time tonight? That's unusual.
He'd be good.
And Mr. Gifford to come up so that we aren't overwhelmed by, the county's great and everything's fine and, it's all lollipops and roses. So I will do that.
Okay.
So that's it for me, Mr. Manager.
Tonight, thank you. I just want to provide a brief update as we've had the rain event continue to kind of come on through. Mr. Lewis will provide a brief update on where we're at tonight.
And if you're not friends with me on Facebook, I'm sending out a set of Willamette Falls pictures every day so you can keep track of the falls as they get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Speaking of falls, the Singer Falls, we had a staff member send me a picture of Singer Falls. I hadn't had a chance to look at them.
Oh, wow.
They're pretty muddy looking, and I suggested to them that the LED lights that the mayor participated in installation, they were set on the mud setting. That's all it was. It's just lighting. They're really not dirty falls. It's just a lighting setting.
They were all brown. They were all lights
brown.
around?
Brown
Yeah.
lights.
Okay.
For Singer Falls. So. it's been record. We've had record rainfall, and it's had a big impact in Oregon City. We've been doing our best to keep up with a lot of calls. Today was a much slower day, but day before yesterday, yesterday was pretty heavy phone call, and lots of reports of flooding, localized flooding, sewer backups. So we expect problems with those as well to continue into tonight. Tonight the rainfall is supposed to peak again, probably starting around 10 through probably 10. So should be pretty extensive rainfall, something similar to what we had before. Maybe a little less. The predictions have been on and off, but so in response to that, we've put on 3 crews, and we'll be working throughout the night just to make sure we're available for road closures. And Jim, what are you laughing at?
I'm just
I know there's
just a level
something funny about this report. Oh, you're timing me? Oh.
I'm sitting here with my stopwatch.
Stand out.
So we've got staff on tonight, and we've really had a good response from both Parks and Public Works. Both groups have been pretty responsive to all the claims or all the reports that we've got. We've added a sandbag station up at the Hillendale Park, so that's a good thing. We don't have any road closures right now. There was a small road closure on Holcomb, and we were able to clean that up and get that back opened up. So that's a good thing. We're not the only ones having problems. There are regional problems all over the region. And speaking of Tri-Cities, they're reporting a peak flow of 76 million gallons a day, which is over their peak capacity. So they're struggling. I know at Kellogg, for instance, they flipped the switch, and instead of pushing flow through the entire treatment plant and creating damage, they've opened the discharge to the Willamette. So that kind of thing happens. Keep in mind, the actual wastewater component of that is, while it's mixed with a lot of stormwater, it's generally a lot of stormwater. So those kind of things happen. When they happen, they post them and they report them, just like we've been doing with our more localized stuff. River levels are expected to peak again later tomorrow, but they're still calling it in really kind of minor flooding stage. So we think we're doing pretty good. Little problems with buildings, and even our own city hall has a leak today in the roof. So our local our facility folks are struggling to keep up with the workload with that. But
Gutter
it's just
back
a
there's
lot of
clogged
rain.
too. I'm just saying.
I checked on that. Gutters were checked recently, so we don't think it's a gutter blockage problem. We just think it's too much rain, just way too much rain. And that's pretty similar to what we're seeing in our sewer pipes and our stormwater pipes. So, it kind of makes sense.
My only problem with that, John, is if you have a horizontal line and there's too much rain, it would be dripping over all the way instead of right in the very center. So either there's an elevation problem in that gutter or there's a clog somewhere.
Well, that could be, but I didn't inspect it myself. So anyway, just this event's not over. We're going to continue to get wet weather, but we're holding our own.
I'm just messing with you.
Thank you.
And just want to add, really proud of the staff. They've been out there trying to address concerns as they come up, prioritizing, getting them to them. Park staff has actually started helping Public Works staff get some of the grates cleaned, just trying to keep the stormwater moving down. Building departments helping where they can or as needed with some of the building reviews that are going around or inspecting buildings and whatnot that are happening. So, hopefully the community just realizes that when they're out there during these big events, it's dangerous out there for our folks. So please be considerate. Police are out there assisting with road closures, blockages, wherever they can. Parks, Public Works, building staff when you do see them out there, and just hopefully they all stay safe as we continue to deal with these events.
And let me add that if there is a road closure barrier, don't drive around it. People did that up at Holcomb. We've got big pieces of equipment that are up now. I drove around it and parked way low because I was going to go up and see, John and the staff. But, generally speaking, folks out there, if the road is closed for a reason. So if you drive around that barrier and you drive into 6 feet of water and you kill your car or your kid, that's not a good thing to do. So as the fire department is like to say, turn around, don't drown.
And Mr. Lewis, did you mention the two sandbag stations that are available for people?
Not really. We issued a new one, so the new one's up at the Hillendale Park. The one that we had before that is down here at Center Street at the operations yard. So
Okay, it's important to know because people are getting floods in their basements and everything else.
Has the library project been delayed because of the weather?
There was some flooding yesterday that they had to address. They brought in pumps to try and keep up with the flows that were coming in. As that button, obviously the building's not completely sealed up, so to know the extent of the delays right now, we don't have that assessment. But they did have to go in, remove some cement, concrete that was poured previously, put sumps in to try and get some of the water out. Just because all the storm water isn't in place yet since we're mid-construction. But we're keeping up with it.
And what I can tell you is that the construction company will have built in several pre-programmed delays, considering they were building over the winter. So they knew that they were going to have situations that were going to be unworkable, whether it's grouting concrete block in freezing weather, which you can't do, or other kinds of things. So they build a certain amount of timeline into that, 6 or 8 weeks at least of predicted job site delays for whatever reason.
And the Clackamas Park is closed.
Clackamas Park is closed right off
And
of the
the
drive.
sewer, the RV
Park is closed.
I know the RV park is closed, but the sewer, the dump.
The water shut down and electric shut down.
No, he's talking about the RV dump site, right?
The
It was
station.
blocked off, but people were still dumping in it. So that's one concern probably. But
They've been responding to that, trying
Yeah.
to remedy that.
Is there so we don't have gates on that?
there's a chain,
Yeah, I think
but they're
people
going
are
around.
pulling up and I had heard one report of that, not a lot.
I saw one too, but
So do we not charge for that?
Donation.
Okay, that's something we should talk about. And there's no way to lock. There's no way to lock it off.
Right.
We do lock it off. We lock off the dump piping basically. I can't remember.
there's a
chain
gate.
there? There must be
There's a
there
chain
because-
across the front, but people just drove through the barricades and back in. by
But
the
there
skate
isn't like
park
a
and-
metal lid or anything on that. Is there a way
on the
to?
pipe. There's something that prevents their dump from. So we've locked that pipe.
So they're just dumping into the
They're
space.
just dumping.
And I don't know that that's a lot, but we've had a couple incidents.
Right. I'm talking.
Was that a snarl?
So yes, it was.
Hey, you brought it up. You got it.
Just a heads up, you guys all got this, but Jim Lefter just sent out an email a while ago saying that recruitment for the city manager has closed. We have 34 applications. He's been screening applicants for minimum qualification. Give us a list on Friday, and we have executive set next Wednesday to look at the whittled down list and to finalize the next step in the process. So, just to let people know, we are moving forward with trying to finalize the city manager issue. Is that it for you, Mr. Conkle?
It is. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Who's Rob? Says best wishes for peace. Enjoy the season, holiday season, and a new year of health, happiness, and prosperity.
Turn it over to the back. I think it's
Rob.
I think it's Amtrak, isn't it?
Amtrak.
Oh, it does have an Amtrak symbol on it, but
It's Amtrak.
Oh, okay. Just curious.
So you're the only one that got one, Mayor? So.
Yeah, well, I get a lot of other things that you don't want to get either.
Sure.
So, anybody else?